Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks, a podcast that's okay if no one's listening to these, as the narration helps us focus. It's Sif Pop. Welcome to Sif Pop Weekly, streaming live most Saturday mornings, or available to download later in your podcast feed. Unless, of course, you're a patron. Patrons get those perks.
I was gonna do it for you, but
I didn't prep you on it. Go ahead, John. Unless, of course, you're a
patrons
patron.
get perks. The chemistry isn't there. You're right.
You're right. Yeah, we should just keep going. I'm your host, Aaron Dicer, and each week we'll chat about movies, TV, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds. And please welcome our guest this week. I can't deal with his sad eyes. It's Jon Negroni, ladies and gentlemen.
You're mocking me, aren't you?
I am not. I am most certainly not. I'm excited to have Jon on to talk Pixar. We just got finished with a beautiful members pre-show about Pixar and kind of the future of the company and where they are now and our thoughts on all their stuff going to streaming instead of to theaters until Lightyear, all that stuff in the pre-show for you if you want to listen to it. But Jon is Pixar famous. We've had him on the show many times to talk about Pixar and other movies as well. And is now a co-member in the CCA, the Critics' Choice Association. So congratulations, Jon.
Thank you. I know the custom is I have to bow and then hand you a vial
right.
of my, tears.
Yes. I'm glad you've studied up on the manual. I think that's really, really good that you're...
You mean the Bible that they gave you?
Yes, I think it's good that you're taking all that seriously for sure. Excited to have you on. Always excited to talk a new Pixar movie. It is certainly something that if you have listened to Sif Pop for any amount of time, you know my love of Pixar and the fact that if you look at my favorite movies of all time, there's one company that dominates, and that is Pixar, because I love the movies that much. So yeah, excited to chat a lot of that stuff with you, as well as Spiderhead. We're going to take a look at the new Netflix movie, Spiderhead, and pick your brain on that one as well. And then we've got a best ever challenge today on best ever Chris movies, since we've got Chris Hemsworth and Chris Evans in starring respectively in these movies. We thought we'd take a look at the Pratt, Evans, Pine, Hemsworth filmography and see who comes out on top. And then, of course, we'll do some buried treasure at the end as well. But let's kick it off, Jon. Let's get right into it. Let's start talking about Lightyear. Legendary space ranger Buzz Lightyear embarks on an intergalactic adventure alongside a group of ambitious recruits and his robot companion, Socks. I had a little bit of a brain hiccup there when I said intergalactic because I just wanted to start singing Beastie Boys. I apologize. We are back in the Toy Story universe, sort of, not really in the movie. This is famously a Pixar pitch from Chris Evans gone wrong on Twitter, where he said, I'm going to play Buzz Lightyear, not the character from Toy Story, but the actual astronaut Buzz Lightyear. We know now that what he meant was the movie that Andy would have seen in 1995 that made him fall in love with Buzz Lightyear. As complex and interesting as that concept is to go through, what about the movie itself, Jon? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was...
Well, first of all, I think that it's important to point out that you invoked the Beastie Boys, and that of course put me in the mindset of Star Trek Beyond. And I can only think of one thing when I'm just like summing up my thoughts on this movie, and I'm like, well, what is that? What is Lightyear? Because it's like kind of it's like you said, it's like we're in Inception, and it's like one dream within the dream. So if like the Pixar universe is a dream of, I assume Andrew Stan and Pete Docter collectively, then we're in like Andy's dream within that universe, because it's like you said, it's like him in the theater. They did like the early access screenings. They called it the Andy experience, because it was supposed to be like you're in the theater like Andy was in 1995 watching what would become his favorite movie, Lightyear, and that's why he buys the toy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of breaks canon, but whatever. Just don't worry about that. What did I think of the actual movie, though?
Yeah, did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay?
Yeah, sorry, I went on a tangent. Just okay.
All right, I'm gonna go with liked it. Kind of right in the middle, maybe teetering on the low side of liked it. I get the sense this one may diminish for me over time, and there's some reasons to kind of get into that. But I had a good time, and there's a sense of humor and a sense of understanding character work in this movie that is just going to pull me along for the ride. Like, I'm just going to be interested in what's the next fun thing Socks is going to say. What's the next fun situation that these people are going to be in. And so I never felt bored. I never felt disinterested. And I always felt like I was having fun. I enjoyed the movie, even if I didn't kind of have some of the more emphatic feels that many of the other Pixar movies might give me.
Yeah, I've been trying to investigate why that might be too, because I feel like that's a pretty common opinion at this point. I was kind of looking at it as, if you look at all the sequels and the prequels, the franchise things, this is a spinoff. Then for me, like, I have like different like levels. I have probably the upper tier of that are movies like, the Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3, obviously. But then you go a little further down, you're in like Monsters University, Incredibles 2, like the good ones. The ones that are just like, that's where I'm at. Like, really liked it. And I think then you get a little bit lower. That's when you're at like Cars 3, Finding Dory, and I think this is in like that little club. They're in their own cabin, having a good time, I'm sure, but I don't want to be their counselor, because I just, it's like you said, I think this movie, it's Pixar Star Trek. It's a Star Trek episode. It's weirdly low stakes in some ways. I mean, not totally. Like, I don't want to be too super literal about it, but does that make sense? Like, it's almost like I don't quite get why the story had to be told, or why they felt like they really want to tell the story beyond a shareholder meeting, I guess.
Yeah, it's trying to tread over some ground about independence versus community. The idea of let's just say the American ideal of bootstrap living, and I've got this, and kind of that heroic one person versus the world kind of thing, and kind of going at it and saying, actually, we're better off if we work together. So I think that's what it's trying to do. I'm not sure that lands in the same way as some of the other themes and messages that they've done, because I'm not sure at the end of the day that there's really those earned moments by the end. Because like you said, it's interesting. The playground the movie is on is big, right? There's a lot of big stuff happening. The ideas are big. The idea of, what he's going through, that I don't necessarily want to spoil. That's a big idea, right, though, and it deals with some real genuine pathos when you think about it, like genuine emotion if you think about being in a situation like he's in, and yet the movie doesn't treat it as if it matters that much. Exactly. And that's interesting to me.
Yeah, because I think the external conflict is pretty good. Like, I think the challenges externally that are happening to Buzz, happening to these kind of, he has these like buddy characters he has to whip up into shape, and it's fun watching them. One of them's voiced by Taika Waititi, and he's just kind of like a goofball, and like they have fun hijinks, and it's, it moves. It's not like the movie's slow. But I think what separates Pixar movies from a lot of other animated films, a lot of films in general that are more like blockbuster, is they have the external conflict, but the internal stuff is usually really, really compelling, like more compelling than you expect. And so like when I was figuring out like what this movie was missing, like after watching the movie, I was like, well, why am I not over the moon for this? You know, pun intended. And I think it's because like that conflict of like, you know, Buzz has to learn to trust other people, and it's hard for me to even kind of articulate like what they're going for. Whereas I can look at like recent movies like Soul, where that's so easy for me to get like why that hit me. You know, it's like, you know, what if you think like your purpose is the same thing as your dream, and that's not true. It's like, shoot, whoa, okay. Like, you know, turning red. It's, you know, like what if like the thing that, you know, you've been repressing for your family actually is what makes you unique, and like it just comes alive when you start to like think about what the movie's about. Lightyear. What if time stuff? Like I don't even know how to like. I don't.
What
know.
if you need other people? Yeah. Well, in honestly, the movie has a pretty interesting story turn, but the problem is you can almost feel that was the starting point, and it's. I'm not sure how that big story turn plays into the other themes of the movie. And generally in Pixar movies, they're really good about carrying the thread of that theme through all the story choices. And I think in this case, it was like, oh, we've got a big sci-fi reveal we want to do. And even if it doesn't really hit home with it, because there's a different message then at that point, at least that I'm picking up with, you know, where they chose to go with the end. So, and I'm talking again around some ending spoilers, but do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Because that was something that I really liked Onward. I think Onward is much better than this movie, but at the same time, I think that's something that Onward kind of tripped up with too, because it had a really good sort of reversal. But when you rewatch that movie, it is hard to sort of take that like message that they sort of like whip around and apply it to the rest of the film. It almost kind of like retroactively sort of changes what you think of the earlier parts of the film. But I don't think it's as graceful as a movie like how Inside Out does that, or how Coco does that. So some of Pixar's best movies tend to just, more you rewatch them, the richer the experience. And then there are just those Pixar movies where one time is probably enough because it's probably not going to get much better after that. But at the same time, I'm curious, like, are kids going to love this? Am I souring on something that is going to be like the next Andy's favorite movie? And I doubt that, honestly, because I honestly, Aaron, I don't know like what your experience was watching this movie, but like people laughed. Like
there was a lot of laughter. There was in our theater. There was a lot of laughter.
But like the kids, like there were kids sitting in front of me and they were just like, they couldn't wait to leave. They were just like, all right.
The kids right to my right were definitely laughing at a lot of the socks stuff.
Oh yeah. No, socks is instant icon.
Which for me is like, well, why did Andy not get a socks toy then? Why did he get Buzz Lightyear?
We were just talking about that with Charlie Ridgely from comicbook.com. He was just like, that's what breaks canon the most, probably. Socks is too lovable.
Andy would have definitely gotten a Socks companion toy, at least to his Buzz Lightyear toy.
We know he's a dog person, so maybe it's that. But
yeah, could be. Did you find it interesting the way this movie had references that worked with canon, like the idea that this is a movie that would have come out in 94 or 95 and that some of the references were from that era? I found that stuff at least interesting.
It's like half and half, because like whenever the movie was trying to be like having fun with 90s stuff, you know, with like the old technology, the analog technology, that was cool because that felt different and unique. They weren't doing the super cutting edge technology. Right. It's kind of like, you know, like watching Alien, right? Like,
right. Yes.
It's fun. Or watching like one of the sequels, which is like, well, we have to kind of stick to what Alien was doing, or like the original Star Wars, and it kind of has to have that lo-fi tech thing. That stuff was cool. When they were quoting like entire Toy Story things, beyond the first scene where I think it's cool because it kind of like gently brings you into this universe, there were times when I think it was unnecessary, when I was like, just be your own movie now. Like, we don't have to keep doing Buzz's quotes, you know, from his like Space Ranger, you know, voice box. I don't think we need that. And it I don't know. I think
see, for me, I think the voice box quotes make sense because they're going to put stuff from the movie in the voice box of the toy. So, you know, every quote that's in that toy has to be in the movie. I mean, I think it breaks canon if they're not. Like that it would be weird if they weren't. What doesn't work for me as much is some of the stuff that I think probably will work for others, but like the you're mocking me, aren't you? Like that doesn't quite work for me because I'm like,
Exactly. Yeah.
that's something Buzz Lightyear said as an awake toy. It's not something that Andy would have known about or that would have been the movie. It's, I don't know, that kind of weirds me out a little bit. I'm like, now I'm starting to try to connect the consciousness of this Buzz Lightyear toy to the movie, and is that actual consciousness built into like, like,
I don't want to have that thought experiment, Aaron. It's been a long week. That's not what I get. I don't want this from Pixar right now. I just want to
really dig in.
Oh man, I just want to have a good time.
But you have to ask that question. If he's saying the same line that an awake toy Buzz Lightyear is saying, not from the voice box, not on the spaceship, packaging, just literally something that Buzz Lightyear just said to Woody, but he's saying it in the movie, that asks some interesting questions about where Buzz Lightyear's consciousness comes from. It really does.
It sort of violates like some of the internal logic of this movie. And again,
right.
we're really getting into it, huh? But because on the one hand, I think that like having Chris Evans voice the character was great, because if it had been Tim Allen has done such a great job with the character as like the kind of goofy Buzz, like the kind of delusional. If you try to do that voice in this movie, I feel like it's just not going to quite work, because this Buzz it has a different energy. And also like we kind of want something a little different. It would be a little bit too close to what we've already gotten before. But then the problem is hearing what hearing those quotes, like hearing the light humor of Buzz via Tim Allen through Chris Evans. It's a good impression. But yeah, I don't think it quite works. Also, I forgot to mention that planet. I'm sorry. Super boring. And if we're going to spend an entire movie on that planet, could they not make it interestinger? I don't know.
The vines in beetle-like bugs weren't enough for you?
I know, right? It's like we're literally like, if you're going to do a movie about a space ranger, in Chris Evans' words, an astronaut, like, why aren't we going to multiple places? We should be going to all these planets and going on adventures? And like, this movie lost me. I didn't watch the trailer, so I didn't know what the premise was. I went into it just being like, give it to me, like, let's do this.
Yeah.
And when I realized what this was going to be, I was so conflicted, because I was like, that is cool. That's bold. Like, it's mini Interstellar. But at least in Interstellar, they go to more than one place.
Well, it's also interesting, and let's continue to get deep and philosophical about the idea of this movie, because I think it is interesting. But here's my question. Are we watching a computer-generated version of what was a live-action movie that Andy saw in 95? Because do we think that Andy is a live-action human being? I think the answer is yes, but we're just seeing him as a computer-generated, universe. Or is this Doctor Strange in the Multiverse, where there are universes where beings are actually computer-generated and animated or whatever? So is this a live-action film that we're seeing as computer-generated? Or did Andy go see one of the first computer-generated film and it was this? That doesn't work, because there's no way they had this kind of computer-generated technology in 95.
It's the Pixar universe, Aaron. In the Pixar universe, The Incredibles had AI in the 60s.
That's true. Right? That's true.
And there is live action in the Pixar universe, because there is live action in WALL-E. That whole thing with the CEO, Shelby Forthright, of By and Large, he's in live action. So, and they had like the commercials too, where it's like live action. So clearly there's a little bit of maybe some multiverse breaking there. But for me to fully explain this, you're right, Aaron. I agree. I should go through the entire book that I wrote. So in chapter 1,
in stores now.
Actually, no, it's being republished, so it's not available right now. But it's going to come out soon someday.
Did you do some addendums with the new stuff?
It's basically rewritten the whole thing, because I'm punishing myself for not really updating it for 7 years.
That's right. It really should have been an annual update. I mean, if we're really being honest, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Every movie.
and I'm looking at the chat too, and I want to point something out because this is another thing that crystallizes my issue with this movie, and it has to do with the consciousness thing, I guess. But in terms of like why this Buzz and like this version of him is not as good as the toy version, it doesn't have the "I will go sailing no more" moment where it like makes you connect with the character. In that original Toy Story, when he has been spent the whole movie thinking that he's a toy and him realizing he can't fly, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. But in Lightyear, we don't get that. Like we kind of just get this guy who's a Chris. And it's very modern blockbuster. It's not a very Pixar character to me.
Yeah, and maybe that was kind of the handcuffs they put on with this is a movie that was released in 1995 kind of thing. Like, maybe they were going for 95 blockbusters, summer blockbuster,
Right.
As opposed to Pixar movie. And that's it's to me, it's an interesting thought experiment because if this is a live action film that Andy is going, to see in 95, that to me changes a lot of the tone things that are going on. Like this came up in my brain because we were talking about how boring the planet is, and I totally agree with that point. I think the planet is uninteresting at best, and these vines are treated as high stakes in one scene, and then after that are just comic relief, and just people will just get dragged away by vines, and it's like people wave their hands at it, like it's not even a big deal.
It's like taking your inciting incident and then resolving it off screen in seconds. It's weird.
Right. And when not even resolving it, just being like, it's just something, we deal with now or whatever. But if that's live action, I don't understand the tone. I don't understand how it's working. So like it just, again, the concept is so intricate and interesting. It's genuinely an interesting concept. But the second you start to kind of place it in places, it gets distracting for me, as does any content that involves time travel, because my brain is just like, oh, and I'm not confirming or denying. Yes, I'm confirming. There is time travel kind of stuff that happens in here as well, right? Not literally time travel any more than us just going from today to tomorrow is time travel, literally. But it's timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbliness, right? So there's this stuff going on, and my brain gets distracted. Well, how does that work? How does this work? And it's just like, I'm not saying movies can't touch on those places. I'm just saying when they do, I think they know their level of difficulty just kind of went up. And this movie, in both of those ways, both with its concept and its timey-wiminess, just kind of distracted me. And so I found myself, honestly, just kind of giving in and just being like, okay, tell me a fun joke, show me an interesting visual. Because the other stuff is just kind of, I wish I could be thinking deeper about it, but it's clear that I'm not going to be able to think too deeply about this one.
Yeah, this is one of those rare cases where I think like the movie isn't thinking that deeply, and like, it's like we're kind of like twisting ourselves in knots trying to make sense out of something that, I mean, compare this movie to the last time Pixar did a sci-fi movie. That's why I was looking forward to it, because I was like, well, the last time we got sci-fi from Pixar, we got WALL-E, one of the best sci-fi films of the 21st century. So what are they going to do with Lightyear? And I try to separate it from, well, it's not a Toy Story movie, it's a Toy Story spinoff. Let them just sort of take that IP, that character, and do their own thing. And this movie has spots of brilliance in that respect, to the point where I think, this is my opinion, if they had just made a robot cat movie named Socks, just call the movie Socks, this would probably be a home run. Like, you don't need the Lightyear branding, in my opinion, but I think it's just, well, we got to do it. We got to do another Toy Story movie, but we can't do Toy Story 5 because, like, come on. I think after Toy Story 4, it's like you can't really do that much left with the premise.
Right.
So now they have to do something else with their, central franchise, the one that is like the beating heart of their company. But this is not, in my opinion, the way to do it. And I'm kind of a little nervous. Like, are they actually going to be able to do sequels? Because it doesn't look like this is succeeding.
Yeah, we took I think this was off show, but we took a look at kind of the early returns on Lightyear, and it doesn't appear to be a home run in theaters by any stretch of the imagination. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what they want to do with this down the line. All right. Anything else that you want to mention about Lightyear? We haven't talked about performances really at all.
That's true. I like this cast. I mean,
So we can
I'm
do
a little
that.
I'm a little sick of Taika Waititi, to be honest. Um, I don't love what he's doing in this, but I certainly thought that like Chris Evans brought some like life to the character that was interesting. And I want to shout out Peter Sohn. I think Peter Sohn, he voices Socks the cat, and I think Peter Sohn's voice work here is like Edna Mode level, of just like,
Nice.
Somebody who is not a typical voice actor, just coming in and doing something so fun that they couldn't hire somebody else to do it. So I think that all really works. Keke Palmer is quite good in this, and I think the character writing could have been a lot better for some of these characters. I really liked Commander Hawthorne. I really liked that character was voiced by Uzo Aduba, and she's not in like the entire movie, but she's in like where it really counts. And I thought that was such an interesting character. I think that's when like the movie had its biggest emotional beats for me were before the second act, weirdly enough. And I think it had like an up moment, kind of. I don't think it like hits that high, but it gets a lot closer than I was expecting. But then it never comes back to that, so I was a little let down there.
I was a little let down that Burnside was never like, oh shoot, during this movie, and went to Isaiah Whitlock Jr.'s catchphrase.
I was gonna say, yeah. Did you like Michael Giacchino's music in this? They really hammered that theme in for Lightyear.
Yeah, I thought the music was great. I really, for me, scores are best when I don't notice them on my original viewing, that it just kind of brings me where I need to be, and then I listen to them afterwards. That's where I really find what I appreciate about them. I try not to get distracted by movie making stuff. It's one of the things I've really tried as I've become more critical about how I view film, is to save the more filmmaking stuff for future views, future insight. Sometimes I can't help it. Sometimes it's like, this director is a genius shot composer, and I'm just going to notice how incredible these shots are composed, or how incredible this one take, moment is. But for the most part, you should feel that stuff, not notice it, right? Like, that's the idea. The idea is you're telling a story, and anything that you notice outside of the story can become a distraction from the story. So the goal, I think, would be to just tell a story where you're not paying attention to that stuff. So I try to kind of turn that part off until future viewings. But I thought the score was beautiful from what I remember. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, save the analysis, like the technical analysis for the video essays. The review is for the people who haven't seen the movie yet, or they just saw it for the first time, and they're
right.
trying to sort of seek out other opinions. And when it comes to that, yeah, you can get into the technicals, but I tend to be pretty surface level with it, just because I think that you do have to sort of sit with it. You have to process that sort of stuff. And it's like, well, did the way that they weaved in that score really bring that whole scene to life? Whatever you want to do. But I certainly was like, I knew it was Giacchino before I knew it was Giacchino.
Yeah,
because it's definitely his style. But I am like that. By the way, that is a reason why I don't like to watch the trailers before the movies anymore, because that is really going to get me thinking about stuff before I actually see the movie with like in context.
Yep.
And so
exactly,
it's helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I just now am realizing that Bill Hader was in this movie.
Yeah, blink and you'll miss it. And it was cool because I've been loving Barry season 3, so I was like, hey, yeah, give the man money. He deserves it.
Yeah, put him in everything. I will also say 3 post-credit scenes. Is that right? Like,
yeah, I wrote an article about this. I will tell you the exact headline because I don't care about my career, my future, but I said Lightyear has 3 end credit scenes because it's not like you have anything better to do. And I think in one paragraph I say something along the lines of, the real villain is you assuming things can change, that you can change, but you can't. You will sit through all these post-credit scenes assuming they'll mean something to you, something that reminds you of that one time this gimmick worked when you felt something in that sticky purple chair. But like the silver light on that Limax screen, it's an illusion, and it's time to leave so the ushers can do their jobs. It's one of our biggest articles of the week. So I was hoping it would kind of fly under the radar, but oops.
No, it is interesting how post-credit scenes have become just this kind of accepted thing, and it is the bane of movie theater workers everywhere that we stick around till the very, very end. But I have mixed feelings because, it's nice that those people kind of get their props, but then I'm just like, yeah, but am I reading the names? I'm not reading any names. I'm looking at my phone until the post-credit scenes start. So
we have to be on, unless I love the movie so much, unless it's like Red Rocket, and I'm just sitting there being like, who is responsible for what just happened to me?
Right. Yeah. Any final words about Lightyear, Jon?
We not once invoked To Infinity and Beyond. I want to thank you, Aaron, for missing that low hanging fruit. We kept it mature. We kept it, Yeah. I liked it. Go to Pixar Pier. It's fun.
I guess I have to change my clothes here then.
You're going to reveal.
My final thoughts are, I don't think you're going to have a bad time if you see this movie. I think this is enjoyable. I think it's fun. Lower the Pixar expectations of it, that idea of you're going to see something super deep, super meaningful. I more often than not cry at Pixar movies. I did not even come close to getting emotional at this movie. And that says something. So lower those kind of Pixar expectations, and I think you can have a good time. People are right about Socks. Everybody's saying Socks is the highlight and the standout, and that is true. Socks is a lot of fun. So yeah, I still recommend it. Go see it. All right, let's move into our next review. Let's talk a little bit about Spiderhead. A prisoner in a state-of-the-art penitentiary begins to question the purpose of the emotion-controlling drugs he's testing for a pharmaceutical genius. Spiderhead is out on Netflix this week, brought to us by Joseph Kosinski, who kind of owns the world right now, with Top Gun Maverick doing so well, which he directed. And I've enjoyed I've enjoyed most of his films, in fact. I'm even an Oblivion fan. I think that's a lot of fun. And certainly Only the Brave is a really, really good movie. So always excited to see what he's up to. This brings Miles Teller back to work with him, and Chris Hemsworth hanging out here as well with many others. So what did you think, Jon? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay?
Is it possible to say I disliked it? Or I liked disliking it?
You're just trying to break the system, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you try to put like some kind of, put me in a room and experiment on me, and this is what happens.
Yes, and this is just what happens. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, to everyone's peril. I'll stick with disliked it, but in an interesting way.
I think that's a good way to say it. I think I'm on the high side of okay. I think there's some really interesting stuff going on here. I think the execution is really bad at times, but I think there's some really thought-provoking things going on here. I think it's structured really well, and I enjoy a couple of the performances. So I think high side of okay makes sense for me. What are some more of your general thoughts, Jon?
So I have to say, this movie is absolutely not boring. It is absolutely correct. Like, you sit down with it, and you when I experienced this movie, I had not read the New Yorker article this was based on, so you can imagine my confusion when like the New Yorker logo pops up at the beginning. But then I realized, this is George Sanders, and I was like, oh, like after the fact, I was like, no wonder I had this experience. Mm-hmm. And I think what I do like about this movie, and what I like about all movies that kind of go into this world, this kind of ex machina like state where we're just going to take a very crafty, weird sci-fi premise and just blow it up to something really absurd, and we're going to test the
Hmm.
boundaries of like human beings. We're going to do the Black Mirror thing and all of that. I
Yes,
think
it's
that
very Black Mirror at times.
extremely, and I haven't seen a ton of Black Mirror, to be clear. It's kind of funny how Black Mirror is like such a brand, or such an easy thing to understand the aesthetic of it, even
Uh-huh.
if you haven't watched a
Yeah.
lot of it,
Yeah.
at least for me. But this is just sort of like a movie that kind of plays it safe at times with its own sort of weird premise, and it's a bit imbalanced for me in that respect. I just don't think it goes all the way. It kind of reminds me a little bit of another movie with Chris Hemsworth, as one of the main characters, Bad Times at the El Royale, which is a movie that I
Oh,
really
you're gonna hurt
like.
me.
I really like that movie, but I just think it's so limited by itself. Like I feel like it should be like 10 times better than it is, and that's kind of how I feel about this one. It's not Hemsworth. I think Hemsworth, like in this mode, his like American accent, and he's just like, in God mode is actually, yeah, I know God mode, Thor, but like him doing it more of like this Machiavellian kind of thing
Uh-huh.
is really compelling to me. And I'm really curious what you think of Miles Teller, because I really dug what Kaczynski was doing with him in Top Gun Maverick and in Only the Brave. And now we're kind of rounding it out with this sort of unceremoniously. And I have kind of mixed feelings. So I want to hear you out.
I thought Miles Teller was great. I just think he's a really great actor. My only issue with him in this movie is he almost felt out of tone with the movie. Like his performance was good, like I thought really good, but Hemsworth was doing something different, and a lot of the other characters were doing something different, it seemed to me. And but I enjoyed it. But I enjoyed Hemsworth's performance as well. I thought it worked for what this movie was doing. I'm sorry, I'm still shook by the El Royale comparison. It's one of my favorite movies.
Oh
So
man. Well, I'm not saying the quality is the same. It's more of like my
it's
experience of
uh-huh,
like what I
uh-huh.
was hoping the movie would be,
Listen,
and it not quite.
if Drew Goddard had written Spiderhead, I would probably love it instead of just thinking it was okay.
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I do want to read the short story because I am curious like how far it goes and like how closely this aligns, because this movie kind of goes to some really wild places, and I don't think I liked it. I don't think I liked the destination of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. That is my main issue with this film is I'm not 100% sure how it wants us to feel, what it wants us to think. That's okay. A movie doesn't have to wear its intentions on its on its frames, but it's one of those things where I at least if I don't have a cohesive idea of what my motives are for these characters, what I'm hoping happens, then it just gets all a little bit nebulous for me. And I don't think the ending gave me anywhere interesting or safe to land the plane, right? Like it just, it just kind of, for lack of a better metaphor, rams the plane into the side of a mountain. You know what I mean? Like it's just,
Yeah.
it doesn't find a way for me to go, here we are at the conclusion I was hoping for, or here we are at the conclusion that I didn't see coming, or here we are at the conclusion that I did not want to happen. Like it doesn't give me any way to feel about where we end this thing. So
It's so hard to nail that ending. I think like rarely have movies managed to, like, I'm thinking of Alex Garland's other movie Men, and then that ending I thought
Sure.
was atrocious. But Ex Machina, and like they make it look easy with that. He made it look so easy with
Right.
how he ended it so perfectly. I think like with this movie too, I didn't know this until after the fact that these were Deadpool screenwriters, Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, I want to say.
Uh-huh.
And that kind of makes sense to me, but I don't know if that's me sort of like reading into something here, because there is a little bit of that mode of like the Deadpool character. Like I'm thinking of the Miles Teller and Journey Smollett characters and why they're here. Like what's brought them here. I don't know if I want to give that away, but like they're clearly here dealing with some like trauma, some wound that is causing them to feel like they deserve to be in this situation to some extent. And the movie is sort of like walking both of them through like their own path to like forgiving themselves. But it's doing it with that weird sort of quirkiness of like Deadpool, I guess. But I don't know if I'm reading into that or if that's really what the movie's sort of going for on purpose. But I mean, the movie is quirky, so I guess I shouldn't.
Yeah. What is this movie saying about pharmaceuticals?
It is saying something that is very frustrating to me because I'll tell you, Aaron, because we haven't talked about this. I finished a book earlier this year that I've been working on through the pandemic. And movies and shows keep taking this idea, this dosage idea that I have as like the central thing in my book. My thing is that it gives you like superpowers. And I certainly have thought a lot about like substance and like what it does to us, like addiction. The Boys season 3 is killing me in that respect. But I think this movie is taking that concept of saying like quite literally, it's a bit on the nose of like it puts you in a prison. You know, that's why we're in the Spiderhead facility. And, you know, I was actually wondering too, like, what does the word Spiderhead have to do with that? Is it really that literal? The idea of like a spider, you're in the spider's web and you can't get out. And, you know, you're being manipulated by a creature that, you know, has you sort of like trying to get into your head. I don't know if that's like me, you know, flailing my arms around trying to make sense out of the
That's what I thought. I just thought it had to do with the idea of like cobwebs, you know, and how pharmaceuticals, you know, create confusion in your mind and those kind of. It's
quite a premise for a movie he made in late 2020 before like vaccine stuff and like all this unrest of like the debate has opened up of like big pharma and everything that's on a lot of people's minds. So I am curious, like, is this one of those like unintentional, you know, commentaries that just quite coincides with people's frustrations across the spectrum? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because you definitely will hear so much from so many different angles about pharmaceuticals. I have, you know, Advil has been the extent of my pharmaceutical life. Like, you know, if I'm feeling sore, I'll take some Advil. Like, you know, but I hear people and respect people who say, you know, there is no shame in having drugs that help you get through the day or taking stuff for, you know, for anxiety issues or those kind of things. Like I hear that. And then I'll hear others, which I think is more in line with this movie, where it's like, we have to be so careful about, you know, dulling ourselves down to the point where we no longer understand our humanity and those kind of things. And I just think we're, you know, I certainly am not the person to ask about it, but there's this interesting precipice that we seem to be on, dealing with the way we understand how chemicals impact who we are and what are, you know, things from not just well-being and health, but personality and thought process and all of those things. And certainly the, you know, the idea of the broadening of the marijuana conversation, like all of that stuff plays into this idea of, because there were definitely echoes in this movie, I thought, of marijuana conversations about, you know, there were some of these drugs that they're dealing with that very much seemed like it was a commentary on, you know, just hanging out and getting high and laughing at everything. So it's conversations that can happen. It's one of those interesting conversations that can happen where I don't know exactly how I feel. And I mean, I'm like that probably more than most on a lot of things. I'm very comfortable in admitting my ignorance and in trying to continue to learn about stuff. But there are certainly many, many, I'll say, political issues where I kind of know where I mostly land. You know, I kind of know where I would draw lines. And this is one where I'm like, man, I genuinely, every time somebody makes an argument about pharmaceuticals, I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. Like, it doesn't matter what the argument is.
I think there's a difference between, and it's a fine line between ignorance and uncertainty.
Sure.
Right. And I think in the same vein that we should be careful, in my opinion, of like what we do with pharmaceuticals and how much we put into our bodies, we should be careful of the media that tells us what to think about that stuff. Right. You know, because it is a trope. The idea of, you know, people who go through rehab, people who go through like mental health, you know, issues, and they take medication, and there are a lot of tropes of like, oh, it makes things foggy, or, oh, it makes things this or that. And there have been times where I've been like, well, I kind of got that impression that that is a widespread common thing from movies and shows. I didn't get it from real life experiences. And so that's usually when my sort of like guard walls go up a little bit of like, well, I want to experience this media. I want to take this movie at its word and, listen to what it's saying. But I also want to kind of look into, different types of people who are discussing it after the fact, because certainly you can go a bit far in the direction of just believing everything that comes your way, and I certainly, like with this movie, I do like that it did open my mind up, because like I dislike it in terms of a movie, but I like what it's talking about. I like that it kind of goes there. I like that it's sort of pushing the idea of like, well, what causes these experiences? What makes you laugh? Is it really a joke, or is it something that's beyond your control? And like, what does it mean to control yourself? And I love how that ties into the theme of like, there are times when you do bad things because you didn't mean to, and like, where does the line fall on like your responsibility there?
Right.
And that's where I think this movie is clicking, and I'm just like, cool, this is much better than something like Extraction on Netflix.
Right.
So I feel a little bad. You know what, Netflix has been I've been a little bit happier with some of their original movies, like very recently, like with Hustle, and I think this is a bit better, but I am kind of like judging it and criticizing it a little harshly compared to how I would something like, Six Underground or whatever.
Yeah. What else do we want to talk about here? I think there is, beyond the messaging and the themes and the ideas of, pharmaceuticals and those kind of things, there is this interesting theme that you bring up about self-grace, the idea of what it means to process your own decisions, your own choices, what you've done. And maybe that's what the ending is supposed to be about, is either the ability or inability to process that. And that at the end of the day, the journey is towards understanding, the journey is towards healing. And if you're not on that journey, then maybe that's the one you're supposed to get on. That's at least the only thing I could kind of find my way towards reconciling what we're supposed to think about the end.
Yeah, I think this movie, it is interesting in the way that it is clearly, I think, trying to get across the value of free will and how free will relates to psychosis. There's a scene in this movie involving, dried blood, and this idea of like, how do you decide to sort of like move on from something terrible when that thing is never going to go away? Not really, but you kind of do still have to make a choice to be something else the next day. To me, that's where that's really George Sanders. That's like full on his sort of like, second chance, you're never, no soul is beyond redemption, however highfalutin you want to get about it. It actually reminds me of another movie that I think that people should check out. If you're kind of like, you like some indie movies and you think like this is interesting and you want to maybe test your grit and watch something a little bit more cerebral, a little bit more contemplative, I would highly recommend High Life from Claire Denis, one of the best films of 2019. Certainly, it's one of the best Robert Pattinson performances. Juliette Binoche is incredible in it as well. Definitely not as accessible as this movie, I think, which is saying something. But yeah, I mean, if you want to go to like the next level, I think that movie handles a lot of these same themes and very, very well. And I would say that, yeah.
I was just saying that movie is very, very interested in what it means to be human, like on all levels. Like it is all the parts of humanity that we like to kind of put in a corner and just go, that's not something we talk about. And this movie's like, that's what it means to be human, by the way.
Aaron, I honestly, I cannot get over like our conversation about Lightyear, and we're like the planet and woo, the aliens, blah, blah, blah. And then we go into Spiderhead and we're like, Aaron, what does it mean to be human? It's just like,
sorry, that's where my brain goes. That's where my brain goes. I guess just on a movie level, like were you ever bored? I was never bored during this movie. I was always interested. And that's the thing. Like I get why you can come out of a movie like this and go, Yeah, I didn't really like that. I totally understand that, but I don't think you come out of this movie going, well, that was boring.
Right.
And to me, that's something. It's a swing. I always dig a swing, and it's a swing that probably works for me more than most people, I imagine, just because I like kind of thinking about those things in that way. I don't think it's poorly constructed. Is there bad movie making here? I don't think so.
No, in fact, I think there's some derivative stuff here.
Sure.
I kind of
Yes.
got the
Yeah.
sense that Kaczynski was sort of like, especially with that opening scene, trying to make a movie that's a response to meme culture a little bit. And, there's literally like a moment where I paused it because it's like, this feels like the background of like a, quickmeme.com thing from like
Hmm.
2011. So there's a little bit of that going on. It's not bad. This definitely seems like a movie that could very well be a cult film down the road. And I think this is one of those movies that people might be, myself included, a little kinder to over the years. Just be like, you
Hmm.
know what? That movie really was like interesting. And it kind of, maybe
Hmm.
it'll age pretty well. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That is Spiderhead. It is available on Netflix to check out if you would like to. All right, let's
What would you pick though, Aaron, between Spiderhead, where you stay home and watch Spiderhead on Netflix, or go to the theater and see Lightyear?
go to theater and see Lightyear. I mean, come on. What did
See
you
that
think I was
Pixar
going to
logo.
say?
The Pixar logo on the big screen itself is worth it. So
That's right. Yeah, just go watch the Hop and Lamp. You know what it is. You know the deal. Before we head into the best ever challenge, reminder that you can be a Sift Pop member at Patreon, patreon.com/SiftPop if you'd like to check that out. We have conversations pretty much every week that we go put in a podcast feed for our Sift Pop members. That podcast feed has all the main episodes, all the bonus episodes, and no ads. So if you want to check that out again, that is patreon.com/siftpop. Check out the different levels and see what sounds interesting to you. All right, into the best ever challenge. We're going to do best ever Chris movies. These are the best ever movies from the four gentlemen typically known as the Chris's. Is that right, John? Has there been a fifth Chris added to this group?
I want to say there is, and I'm forgetting.
Chris Kattan?
Christopher McQuarrie. Can we do directors? I feel like, yeah, we're gonna get like Christopher Abbott. The indie Chris. We could do
Yeah.
that if we want.
Yeah, yeah.
I think this is a good selection though. The four main, the
Yeah,
Mount Rushmore.
when people
Chris's.
say the Chris's, these are the four that come to mind, I think. So
Sure.
we're going with Pratt, Evans, Pine, and Hemsworth. We will go number 5 to number 1. If you do have it higher, feel free to trump, and we will talk about it wherever it is the highest. I will kick us off at number 5. Let's get into it. Bad Times at the El Royale is my number 5 Chris movie of all time.
No wonder you were giving me gruff earlier.
This, of course, is Hemsworth in Bad Times at the El Royale. I did a rewatch of this movie within the last year or two. Time has no meaning these days, but it's been recently, and was blown away because I thought I loved this movie. And I watched it again. I was like, oh, this is a transcendent movie. I get it. There is so much incredible visual metaphor work going on in this movie that you could probably watch it 4 or 5 times and pick up new stuff. Like, it is just the stuff this movie is doing with the idea of a choice between two things, picking sides, borderlines, like all this stuff is integrated into the story, the dialogue, the visuals, the plot. So interesting in so well. I kind of had my mind blown on my last viewing. So I'm definitely in an interesting recency bias about a movie that's been out for a while. but it is really, really incredible stuff. And that's before you start to get to some of these performances, which are really, really good. Bridges is amazing. Jon Hamm does this really great thing. Like, I remember the first time watching this thinking, oh, Jon Hamm, not really doing a great job in this, like not really buying
Really?
this. And then about halfway through, I
Okay.
realized he was playing a character in the movie, and he was doing it perfectly because I wasn't buying his character in the movie. So I think he's phenomenal in this. My real introduction to Cynthia Erivo, who I just think is brilliant in this and many other things that she has done. I really, really love this movie. I really love the way it ends. And all the things it's saying again about the idea of choice and the idea of pick a side. So yeah, brilliant stuff going on here, no matter what Jon Negroni says.
Hey, look, I will admit I did consider this because I was like, this is one of my favorite Chris Hemsworth performances. But the one that I would have narrowly put on my list, but I didn't, was the other Drew Goddard, Chris Hemsworth collab, which, Cabin in the Woods. The only reason I didn't is because I was like, well, he's not really the main thing about that movie. And it's not a memorable enough performance. So that's how I justified not putting it on there. And I say that wondering like, oh, is that going to be Aaron's like number 4 or whatever?
We'll find out. No, I'll go ahead and tell you now. It was in my honorable mentions. I do like Cabin in the Woods quite a bit. So yeah, I definitely had it in my honorable mentions. What's your number 5, John?
My 5, and I'm going to get the Marvel movies out of the way. There's 2 on my list. They're 5 and 4. 5 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And I picked Volume 2 over the first one because I think Guardians of the Galaxy is probably the best Marvel movie, or one of them. And I'm very, very looking forward to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I'm looking forward to, I haven't seen the trailer, but I hear maybe some Guardian action is going to be in the next Thor. Who knows? But Volume 2, I always liken it to the B-side to Guardians 1. It's the deeper sort of like hit. Every time I rewatch Guardians of the Galaxy, I think it's fun. I think it's blockbuster entertainment. I think the characters are amazing. And I love Chris Pratt, and it's my favorite Chris Pratt thing. Because I think of all of the big blockbuster movies we've gotten from Chris Pratt over the years, and, Jurassic World especially, I just feel like the Guardians movies get his appeal. Like what makes him appealing to everybody, including his harshest critics. And I think people kind of dislike the guy unfairly, in a sort of like, abstract way of like, okay, with Chris Pratt, blah, blah, blah. He's, his stuff about his personal life, whatever they want to do, that doesn't matter. For me, I think the Guardians movies showcase like him at working his best, most appealing mood. And I think that's explored most thoroughly in Volume 2, which is his daddy issues. And the themes of that movie have just never left me. They just like, not to say anything negative about the first Guardians, I think Volume 2 is just like one of Marvel's most like resonant stories. Like what it's saying on so many levels about abandonment and familial trauma. And every time I rewatch it, every time I get more and more out of it. And I think it's one of the sneaky, brilliant Marvel movies. So it's not my favorite one. There's one more that I was going to bring up that has a Chris in it, and almost all of them do, I guess. But yeah. Guardians, I think I got a little bit of, whatever. It's not that great in 2017, but I
really like it. I like both I like both the Guardians of the movies. I don't blame you for that. My Marvel pick is in my honorable mention. I won't mention it yet, just in case it's your number 4. So that'll bring me to my number 4, which is Chris Pine in Hell or High Water. I have it number 4.
Interesting.
I thought maybe you trumped that one. I thought maybe you had that one higher. But yeah, Hell or High Water is one of. I'll also have a lot of recency bias with this. I just watched this, introduced a friend to this like within the last couple months. This is a perfect movie. It's one of those movies you watch and you just go, "Oh, that's a perfect film." It's so well done. It's perfect from beginning to end, and I love everything that's going on here. So yeah, love Hell or High Water.
No comment yet.
Oh, maybe you should have trumped it.
Oh yeah, I didn't because I was too slow on the quick draw there. But you did something kind of quick. I think that's great. But yeah, we might have to.
We'll talk about it a little bit more later, possibly.
Yeah.
What is your number 4?
My number 4, and I think it's probably the best Marvel movie that doesn't have Avengers in the title. It's Thor Ragnarok, which I think is just a home run in every respect. And the reason I think it's one of the best Chris movies is because it took a Chris who had been neglected, who had been done wrong in so many of these like Dark World, the first Thor to some extent, Avengers Age of Ultron. I mean, I just think that Thor character and that Chris Hemsworth performance, it wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't the full Chris Hemsworth experience. And this movie was so good at redefining Chris Hemsworth's like contribution to the Marvel universe that they went and made another Thor movie. They made a 4th Thor movie. How many other Marvel characters have gotten 4 movies? But this movie was so good, it sort of erased those first 2 in terms of like, what people's expectations for a Thor movie could be. How much fun can you have with the Asgardian characters. And it's, I think, all comes down to Taika Waititi and Chris Hemsworth just being so good at bouncing off of each other, both on the screen and clearly like behind the camera, right? And I think his journey in this movie is so interesting. Like the idea of what Ragnarok is, the idea of Asgard not being a place. I mean, every time I rewatch this movie, I come back to it for the laughs because it's very, very funny. Chris Hemsworth is very much a comedic powerhouse in this, but I think what pushes it to the next, step, the next level of great Marvel movies for me is there's really good dramatic heft in this. And there are choices he makes beyond just being like, I got to beat up the person, him using his head and also being clever. And to me, that's what being a Chris is all about. As a John, to my my Chris's, this is the kind of Chris mode you want to go in, I think. God mode.
I enjoy Ragnarok as well. My Marvel movie in my honorable mentions was Infinity War, which I really
Endgame. That's interesting.
I think Infinity War is a much superior movie to Endgame, but
no kidding. We'll have to have that debate one day. I think Endgame is the best Marvel movie. By far.
I think it has the most standing ovation moments, but as far as like an actual movie goes, I think Infinity War feels more complete and more interesting to me.
I get that.
Endgame does. Anyhow, yeah, that's Pratt.
We'll put them together, Aaron, and we'll just say it's one big movie we both love a lot.
It is. Yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that perspective. All right, on to our number threes. I have a Chris Pratt movie at number 3. Calling it a Chris Pratt movie is a bit of a stretch, but he definitely plays a decent role in Moneyball, which comes in at my number 3. Yeah, my love for this movie is well known. I think Brad Pitt is perfect in this movie. I love so much about. It's interesting because sports movies are well known for being like underdog movies, right? And this movie does a really. I mean, once you get past just the fun dialogue, the Sorkin-ness of it all, like all that, you get to this movie that is doing the sports movie off the field, right? It's a sports movie where the typical underdog story isn't taking place on the field. It's taking place off the field. And I shouldn't say owner, operations manager, director, whatever the title is for Billy Beane, is the underdog because he's doing something in such a new and different way. And man, I am just a sucker for that kind of story where it's like the guy with the new ideas, the person with the new ideas comes in and shakes up the old gray hairs and says, here's a new way to look at this. Here's a new way to do it. It helps that it's based in reality. And that, this is a true thing that Billy Beane did with the Oakland Athletics. So yeah, I really, really enjoy this movie. It is a pleasure to watch, and it is my number 3.
I'm going to have to revisit it because I haven't seen it since that Oscar season when it got nominated for like tons of awards and everything. And I remember liking it a lot at the time for that reason. It's like, it was so innovative there hadn't been a lot of sports movies like that's what you're saying. And we would go on to get more like this. We would get like High Flying Bird, for example.
Yeah.
I love that. I love any movie that like takes something that I'm not usually that interested in this case, baseball. And, especially the number system behind baseball and stats and things like that. Like I've never been into that. And it kind of makes it exciting and interesting to watch because the characters are exciting and interesting with it.
Characters are so great. The relationship and chemistry between Pitt and Jonah Hill is so perfect in this movie. And yeah, I love so much of what goes on here. Yeah, I'd highly recommend a rewatch.
Honorary Chris, let's say.
Honorary Chris, yes. What do you got at number 3?
Well, I was going to say Oscars 2022 and put Chris Rock in it, but then, the producer of the show told me that I would never work in this town again. So
that's true.
No, I'm going to say Snowpiercer.
Oh,
which,
okay.
Tough for me not to have it higher, but this is my Chris Evans pick. And you'll notice I did at least one for every Chris, except the best Chris gets 2. So you can do the math there. But yeah, this is my favorite Chris Evans movie. I mean, look, I do really love like what he does with Captain America because who doesn't? Captain America: First Avenger is such an exemplary film. Okay, sure. But Snowpiercer is like, this is the movie I get out of bed for. I like this movie so much. This is Bong Joon-ho, of course. I like this premise so much. My wife and I watched the show on FX which just finished its third season. And it's so funny to me because like it takes like what this movie was doing and it stretches out into a series, and it does its own thing with it, which is really interesting. But it kind of rests on how just biting the commentary is in this movie, which itself I think was like based on a different property of like a different thing. It's Xerox scan of another thing. Bong Joon-ho kind of put his own stamp on it, but just this idea of like the underclass going through this train, and you just watch the disparate levels of the class warfare in this. It's clearly the prototype to Parasite, which would go on to be, you know, Bong Joon-ho's most celebrated work, and it starts here. And I think Chris Evans is such a key component to that because he is playing a character you haven't really seen before from the guy. I mean, at this point, we'd seen him as like Human Torch. We'd seen like Not Another Teen Movie. We'd seen, you know, Scott Pilgrim, I think was right before this, where he was like that kind of, you know, jerk, you know, kind of like, you know, but in a funny way. And, you know, I remember like when he was going to be Captain America, people were like, wait, what? And it's totally swatched, like gone totally in the other direction, right? Now people are like, it's Chris Evans. He's like, you know, America's, you know, butt, you know, what are you going to do? And Snowpiercer, though, I think is
I thought that was Southern California. I could have been wrong. But.
Yeah. I think that, but no, I think Snowpiercer is peak, like, bad Chris Evans, like evil Chris Evans, but in a righteous way. And it's such an interesting combination of those things. And there's a reveal in this movie I of course will not give away of how dark this person has gone, this person you've been rooting for the entire time. And it speaks to the themes of the movie. It speaks to like quite literally the atmosphere of this movie, like where it exists in a future where the world is, you know, in a new ice age. And I just think this movie absolutely, like the train itself, it just never stops moving in every respect. So Snowpiercer, it's
good choice, definitely in my honorable mentions. And just to be clear, I was not trying to make some political metaphorical statement. I was just saying the shape of America. I think that has to be the back, right? Like, I mean, America's genitals are clearly at the front, lower portion, and so the butt has to be. It was all geographical, is all I was saying. Moving quickly out of that conversation into the number twos. This is where I have Knives Out. Chris Evans is in Knives Out, and I love this movie so much. Man, it is so nice to see a murder mystery, old school style murder mystery done with such respect, such care, in such seriousness, if I'm being honest. And yes, it's fun and funny, and it has that little bit of quirk that murder mysteries have to have when they're done this way, but it feels authentic. It feels real, even as like some sort of hyper reality. It just still feels like something that's really happening. Add to that it has a consistent, coherent theme and message that it's getting at as well. And obviously it's going to be a home run for me. I think Rian Johnson is a genius. I'm always excited to see what he does next. I am super bummed that they felt like they had to put Knives Out in the title. It just infuriates me. I mean, why not a Benoit Blanc mystery? Why not, John? Why not, John? Why, like, do they think the audience is so dumb that they will not go see, like, they will not figure out that this is...
The answer is unequivocally yes. I mean...
Oh, marketing people, man. I'm just like, at least it's not Knives Out 2. Like, good. At least he got to call it Glass Onion. You know, the new movie's going to be called Glass Onion. Great title.
Awesome.
I just wish it was Glass Onion. I just wish that was the movie title. I don't know why it needs anything else.
Yeah, start the title with, in 1995, Rian Johnson bought a toy. This is that.
Yes, exactly. But yes, anyhow, Knives Out is really, really great, and I'm super excited to see all the Benoit Blanc mysteries as they continue. So yeah, is my number two. What's your number two, John?
Well, real quick, I do want to say,
Knives
Out. I strongly considered it. Well, the reason I didn't is because the ensemble is so amazing, and I was like, well, I want to pick something where it's more of like Chris Evans at the center. But this would be my other Chris Evans pick because this is one of those rare movies that like plays with what you already think about Chris Evans and uses that. And like, Rian Johnson is so smart, like you said. So,
yeah, he's brilliant.
Pick. My number two. Okay, I told you the best Chris is going to get two movies. So number two, his second best is of course Wonder Woman. Everybody knows it. I had to put Wonder Woman here because it's not the best movie, but I think it is one of the best Chris movies because it gets at why I think Chris Pine is the best Chris. Because, like, what is a Chris? Let's get philosophical for a moment. Pull up a chair. Chris Pine in this movie captures to me, like, the type of guy that is obviously a hero. He's masculine. He is heroic. He has all the, like, machismo, the kind of, like, typical old-fashionedness of that, but in a modern way, in a way that, like, we more understand how to like, present yourself and function in a society where those traits can go to good use. And Wonder Woman is such a great, like, it's okay to have, this guy sort of like not in the back seat, but as the supportive character to Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. And I just love what he does in that respect. He was so good in this movie, they had to bring him back for 1984, which we talked about back in 2020, and it didn't quite work there. But I think that this movie still holds up quite well in that respect. I think the reason this movie works as well as it does is because of Pine and how he bounces off Gal Gadot and as that secondary character, but really like a co-lead in a movie that, he doesn't have powers. He's a scrappy dude and he's trying to, but he has so much grace and intelligence and just such a heart in this movie that I think can sometimes be missing from the other Chris's. Like they get all the other things right, but it's like, where's that heart? Where are those like beady eyes that are going to tell me that everything is okay? That's Chris Pine. He's a service to society, and I'm gonna get even further into that in my next one. But
nice,
yeah.
Well, let's get into it. Our number ones. My number one is a Chris Pratt film. Well,
does that mean you think Pratt is the best Chris? Be honest.
Pratt is the only Chris that made my top 5 twice. So
that's a tacit endorsement.
That does not mean I think he's the best Chris. It does, however, mean that I think he's made good movie choices.
Fair enough.
He has a role in one of my favorite movies of all time, Her, and so I have Her at number 1. I love this movie. I've talked about it many, many times. Its vision of the future of technology and its vision of how technology is evolving us is so precise and so makes so much sense that it's almost hard to watch because you really get a look at what our future is as we approach the singularity. And it's wild to me how smart this movie is about personal assistants in the future, and came out at a time where personal assistants were really just kind of starting. You watch this movie now and you go, oh yeah, well, we've seen this. And it's like, yeah, but we saw this after this movie came out. A lot of kind of what it's referencing and what it's doing. It just feels like such a inevitable view of the future, and I find its themes, its performances, and everything about it so interesting and meaningful. So yeah.
If I knew we could pick Her, one of the best films ever made.
I mean, Chris Pratt's in it. It's in the category.
It's
in the category.
It. So I thought we were supposed to pick the main character.
Maybe I need to be more clear about this. The Best Ever Challenge is designed as a way to pick a category and then pick the best movies in that category. It's not meant to necessarily be a philosophical statement on,
Oh, I'm putting that part in myself for sure. I went.
But I like that everybody interprets it differently. That's fun for me. But yes, in general, it's just like if it fits the category, then just rank the movies.
It does work out because then we get to have pretty different lists here. So
yeah.
In that respect, I got to say, belated trump to my number 1, which is Hell or High Water.
Nice.
Which your recency bias, in this case, actually is working out because Hell or High Water, like you said, perfect movie. Taylor Sheridan is just, there is something about the way that man taps into the neo-Western mythos, which is still ongoing, is still being developed.
Has he cloned himself? How is he doing as much as he is doing? I don't understand. Right. It's wild how much he's responsible
between
for.
Film and TV. It is pretty insane. And I definitely I think that he's had weak efforts before. He's not, he's not a full on like can do no wrong kind of guy. I do think that, for example, Wind River, with kind of the follow up to this, I don't think was quite as good. But Hell or
But it's
High
still a
Water,
good movie. Wind
yeah,
River's not a bad movie.
exactly. Yeah, even at his lows, it's still pretty good stuff. And I think Sicario is probably his best effort overall, I guess, because I think that compared to Hell or High Water, it I think you could argue that it's the better movie on some things. But I mean, I just watching this in the theater and I didn't know what I was in for. I certainly went into it knowing that it was okay. Chris Pine. I already knew at that point he was the best Chris. I'd already been won over. But I was like, okay, but what about I think Ben Foster and what are we going to get from this movie? Is it going to be kind of like a slow sort of thing? It's like it's going to be one of those bank robber things where the whole thing is them just trying to get away. No, it is a kind of this neo heist movie where it's just like we're going to do as many heists as we can before we get caught. And again, I'm picking so many these Chris movies have so much in common with class warfare. It's a little suspicious actually, but this gets to the other aspect of Chris Pine as the best Chris, which is my campaign ongoing. I think that in this movie he captures the dark side of the Chris's in general. He captures the combination of like being part of a system or being part of a structure that is objectively evil. What he is doing is objectively wrong. But because he has his own moral code and he's adapting it to his own, needs, that is like such a deeper and more heartfelt commentary on Americans in general, especially in, West Texas, than I can certainly come up with. Certainly that I can sum up. If I try to write it myself, I don't think I could. And I just think that Chris Pine brings that humanity to a dark human being in a way that is sympathetic without glorifying his actions. That's like the weird line. What makes this movie so genius is like it does not come out on the side of like this was a good idea, but it does come out on the side of like this was inevitable. To kind of borrow what you were saying about her in terms of like technology. Just as inevitable as I think as we make way into like the her of like our world, I think this is the dying. This is like what is going to eventually die out, and it's these people in this situation who were promised something and given something totally different, and we watch the consequences of that. So genius movie. Yeah, you were spot on, Aaron, to put it at number 3. I just think that you accidentally put a 3 there or 4 or whatever it was, and I think you meant number 1, but that's okay.
It may climb there. It continues to climb up my favorites of all time.
So good.
And each watch burgeons that case. I was floored this last watch in a fresh way by the final scene between Pine and Bridges? Is that right? Jeff Bridges?
Bridges, yes.
Yes, yeah. For some reason I was back in bad times at El Royale and I was like, well, I can't be Jeff Bridges.
He was in, yeah.
But their last scene together has so much underneath it, and like it's brilliant writing. It really is. It's just brilliant writing, and the whole movie is just so very, very good. So yeah, Hell or High Water is certainly a great choice.
And I do want to give props to Dave McKenzie. I didn't mention him as the director. Taylor Sheridan wrote the film, so just bona fides all around.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at some honorable mentions. What did you have?
Honorable mentions? I didn't write any.
Okay, all right. Here's what I had.
I can think through them while you do yours.
Yeah. I actually just did the math in my top 5, and then the honorable mentions I'm about to honorably mention. Each Chris is represented with 5 movies. I did not do that on purpose. It is wild to me that it comes out exactly 5, 5, 5, 5. But that is the case. Part of that is I already mentioned Infinity War with Pratt, Evans, and Hemsworth. I'll get to count that one. Lego Movie. Pratt gets to count, which I think is worth a mention. Really enjoy that. Zero Dark 30, Pratt gets to count. I think that's worth a mention. We briefly mentioned Scott Pilgrim, which Evans gets to count. Gifted is one of my favorite Chris Evans movies. Really enjoy that one. So I have that one listed. Star Trek, I think, is worth mentioning. The first Abrams Star Trek is really good. Pine and Hemsworth get to count that one.
Yeah.
So that's Star Trek. Unstoppable, I think, is worth a watch. I think Pine gets to count that one. This is one many people will disagree with me. That's fine. You're not me. I loved this movie. Into the Woods. Chris Pine gets to count. Chris Pine not only gets to count Into the Woods, he is phenomenal in that movie. I love him so much. He's so fun. That is just the musical nerd in me coming out, I think, probably. But I really did enjoy Into the Woods. Chris Pine also gets to count Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
That's true.
So he'll get that in his column. You mentioned Cabin in the Woods that Hemsworth gets in his column. Rush, I think, is worth putting in the Hemsworth column. Really, really enjoy that movie. And then you mentioned Snowpiercer, which goes in the Evans column. So those were my honorable mentions. 5 movies.
All right. I agree with a ton of those for sure. I think of the Chris Pratt's, and hopefully I'm not repeating too many that you've already said here, but I do really like Onward. I think that not everybody loves his voice work in that, but I do really like it. Wanted, which is the first time I ever saw him in anything. Kind of a bit role in Wanted, but I liked that movie quite a bit, and I remember people kind of shrugged at it.
Yeah,
but I thought that was quite good. I was sad it never got like an extra movie. And then I have to echo you on Lego Movie is probably the best movie that he's like the main character in my I think probably. I wasn't a big fan of some of his other stuff, but I did like Jurassic World. When they were kind of testing him out in blockbuster mode. And I think that's a movie that hasn't aged super well, but I think it's not as good as I remember it. But man, the first time watching Jurassic World in the theater was pretty great.
Yeah.
I agree with a bunch of your Chris Evans picks. I mean, Captain America, the First Avenger, absolutely. I liked The Losers, even though it's not a great movie. Same for Push. Those are just kind of like they're kind of doing like, okay, Chris Evans, action hero, how do we do it? I think he had like a role in like Street Kings, and none of those movies quite clicked for me, but I definitely liked what they did with him in Before We Go, with him and Alice Eve. Not a movie everybody likes, but I kind of like that sort of like romantic comedy. Chris Evans is interesting. Put him in some romantic comedies again. I want to see that. I think that would be really great. As for Hemsworth, Hemsworth is so interesting because like I haven't liked a lot of movies like Rush you mentioned, of course, and Cabin in the Woods.
Did you not like Rush?
Those are like the rare exceptions. Yeah. But there's so many that I just think are like not quite like Red Dawn and Ghostbusters and
So the five Hemsworth movies that I counted were basically 2 3 were Hemsworth movies, Bad Times at the El Royale, Cabin in the Woods, and Rush, and then the other 2 were just Marvel and Star Trek. A bit part in Star Trek. So yeah,
he's so good. But yeah, it's weird. I mean, 12 Strong I thought was okay, but nothing like wow. You got to see it. Get out of the house. Let's go.
Some of them are terrible. Like was it In the Heart of the Sea? Is that the name of that movie?
Yeah, I don't think that's terrible, but it's definitely forgettable. I don't know. I'm a sucker for movies with matte backgrounds.
Okay, well there you go.
Yeah. As for Pine, I mean, Star Trek, Carriers. I'm a big fan of Carriers. I think that's like a really cool little movie that people kind of miss. Princess Diaries 2. Okay. I strongly considered it, and again, I was like, never work in this town again, Negroni. If you put Princess Diaries 2 as number 1, so I did.
Listen, I put Into the Woods in there, so
There you go. Yeah. Outlaw King. Really like Outlaw King.
Nice.
Better movie than I thought it would be. Some of them have been stinkers, like This Means War and Finest Hours. I don't think it's that great, and Wrinkle in Time I think is so sad, but overall though, Chris Pine, best Chris in my opinion.
There you go. All right, let's move on from that for head to our buried treasure. What's that one thing in any area of pop culture that you want people to know about? I will go first because you're our guest, so you can finish us off. I'm going to go with Stranger Things part 1 of season 4, which I know dropped a while ago. But if you started watching it when it dropped, you would just now be finishing. That's how long these episodes are. No, I do remember when I saw the runtime of these episodes, I was like, what are we doing here?
The next day you were done.
But that is, my wife and I started watching it and we were hooked, and we were just like, we're going to plow through this because I think this is the best Stranger Things since season 1. I really do. Yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do with the storytelling has really tightened up this season. I know
ironically,
the stakes.
Considering the runtime.
Exactly. Yes. I know the stakes for every one of these characters. I find their actions to make sense. I'm with them. It's doing a really good job of, separating and bringing back. And I'm really impressed with what they're doing with Stranger Things this season. I did not expect to like it as much as I did. So yeah, I wanted to give that a shout out.
Same here. I mean, I started it being like, I doubt I'll get through this, but I was like, oh my gosh, like this has urgency again.
Yes.
Because it feels like they're moving it toward an end game, like the first season was. Like people could actually die now. And I think that it kind of was not like that before. It was kind of cartoony before. And now it's like, with the exception of Will Byers, I think all of these characters are getting their due, but they really... Will Byers needs a revolution in this show because they just keep dropping the ball on his character. Just let him be what they're clearly setting him up to be and make that part of the story, please. Like, I'm so sick of them dancing around it, but otherwise.
Yeah. No, totally
twist, agree. I'm not going to say it, but the twist is quite good. I actually was pretty
It's really
good.
Pulled
that off.
It's really good. It's great storytelling. It's just great storytelling. It's a perfect story turn. The best story turns are the ones where you both are, whether or not, when you saw it coming or how you saw it coming, whenever that moment was for you was a beautiful surprise, right? Even if it's not in the exact moment that they reveal it, but it also makes complete sense. Those are the best story turns when you can pull off both of those things.
Especially when the show like signals that it's coming, because the show it's always being like, this doesn't make sense. And it's telling the audience like, this isn't us being like bad writers. It doesn't make sense for a reason. Put the pieces together yourself. And that's something that a lot of stories forget to do. So people think it's just like flaws in the storytelling and they're not being signaled to do some detective work, but it's Stranger Things. Of course you got a little fun mystery.
Yeah, no, it trusts the audience in a way that I always appreciate. So yeah. What's your buried treasure?
I'm going to carry on a theme that I think I've been doing every time you've invited me on, Aaron, and that's, we always talk about Pixar stuff, right? And I go animation, and I love animation, obviously, but I've recommended anime in the past. I think I've recommended manga in the past, and I'm going to recommend something that is both great in those respects, and that is Spy X Family, which has been just ruling my heart for the last month and a half. The first season is about to finish up. It's on Crunchyroll. And Spy X Family, for people who aren't familiar, the manga has already been out. It's already been completed. I've been reading the manga for the first time because I love the anime that much. And I thought my favorite anime of this year was going to be Ranking of Kings, which is also like unbelievably excellent, unbelievably good. I'm like in shock of how fantastic manga and anime has been since 2020. It has just been like a totally different like scale of good lately, for me at least. And Spy X Family, I think, is the culmination of that. The premise of this, Aaron, because I don't know if you're familiar with it, so I'll try to explain it. So the story of Spy X Family is we're in a sort of Cold War era fantasy world. It's not fantasy, but I'm just saying it's like alternate, it's like the technology of the 1960s, but it's like different kind of countries, but it's representing like East and West Berlin. And this is a world where people are like spies. And so like being a spy is like the most dangerous thing you can do. There's like a secret police that's like very like intense in that very like manga anime way. And we follow a spy named Twilight. That's the guy on the left there who, has never had a family. He's never been interested in romantic prospects. He has a lot of traumas in his past, but he's one of the best spies out there. And he's given a mission as a perpetual bachelor, somebody who's always put the mission first, that he has to start a fake family in order to enroll a child at the most prestigious school in this country so that he can get close to essentially this anime's version of Hitler, like somebody who's trying to start like a Nazi party, and is like seeing success. And so he adopts this little girl who, unbeknownst to him, and hear me out on this, Aaron, because I know what you're going to do. She is a telepath. Because she is an experiment of like these kinds of things that they're trying to do to start wars, and like they explain it eventually, but she can read minds, so she knows that he's a spy. And then of course they need a wife, and they just happen by happenstance, unbeknownst to him, they find somebody who is an assassin. And that's the mom in this family. She's an assassin who is in part of this family because she doesn't want people to be suspicious that she's not married, because she's an assassin and she's trying, that's her like side job or whatever. And this little girl knows that her fake mom and dad, but to her are real parents are a spy and an assassin, and she thinks that's the most exciting thing in the world and absolutely loves it. And this show is basically perfect. This anime, I like literally, Aaron, like we started this up and I got the notification the new episode came out today, and I was like, another thing to look forward to after I get to have this super fun conversation with Aaron, who's so great. Then I get to watch Spy X Family. What a perfect Saturday. So yeah.
Nice. Spy X Family, available on Crunchyroll. In Stranger Things Season 4, Part 1, available on Netflix. Part 2 coming pretty soon, I think.
July
in
1st?
July. Yeah, I think so.
coming.
Yeah, we're just a couple weeks away from Part 2 dropping as well. Well, we did it, John. We managed to do a podcast today. Congratulations.
Impressive stuff.
And
Yeah.
really, really put all the chords in the right places and, had sound come out of our mouths and
sometimes
record it digitally. Yes. Yes. Occasionally. Thanks so much for joining us today for Sif Pop. It is part of the Studio DNA podcast network. You can find out more about other shows on the network at Studio DNA Media or by searching Studio DNA in your podcast player. Huge thanks to Phil for producing the audio and video show today. And big thanks to Jon Negroni for hanging out with us today. John, where do you want to send people? What do you want them to check out?
Well, first of all, thanks for just letting me do this. It's
absolutely
the most fun thing, talking about stuff that's super fun. Even though we talked about 2 movies we didn't love that much, but that's fine. No, if you're kind of like, hey, this guy, I like the cut of his jib, and if you want to, hear me talk about more things in any sort of movie form or whatever, I do a podcast called Cinemaholics with Will Ashton from Collider, and every week we talk about tons of movies. So cinemaholics.com is where you go for all that stuff. That's where I also put reviews. I'm also the film editor of theyoungfolks.com. That's where I edit reviews. If you want to write a movie review or you want to write about film and you're a bit younger and you want to have a mentor like me, unfortunately, I'm always welcoming applications to check out The Young Folks. I love teaching people how to think about film and write about film. So absolutely open invitation to do that. I'd love to work with you. So yeah, just check that out. Find me on Twitter. If you want to hit me up, my DMs are open. Jon Negroni on Twitter. Boom.
Very nice. Much love and gratitude to our Sif Pop members for giving monthly to make Sif Pop a real thing. Support starts at $3 a month, and you get access to bonus episodes, other fun perks. You can check all that out there. You can find out the information at patreon.com/siftpop. Lots of ways to connect with us. Feel free to leave a comment, a rating, or a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And you can even email, old school email, because email has become old school now, at feedback@sifpop.com.
Can we snail mail as well?
Feel free. Feel free.
Right.
Finally, if you're having a good time, your movie-loving friends will probably like the show too. So make sure you let them know about it and that listening is much easier than officially getting bingo. We will be back next week with some chat on Elvis, Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, as well as some other fun stuff. And we will see you then. Thank you to those who've hung out live with us today. Appreciate you. And we will catch you on the next one. We will see you, I think, not Saturday. I think we're going next Monday. So a week from this coming Monday is when we will do Sif Pop next. So we'll see you then.